Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing very, very well. I'm doing fine, thank you very much. All the better for spending some quality time with you. I do hope you're going to get that quintessential drink to refresh yourself. If it's a hot day, something lovely and cold, or in fact, if it's an icy cold day where you are, something lovely and warming. Do put some comments in the comment section. I do love hearing from you, even if it's only to say hello or to tell me what you enjoy drinking. I love hearing from you. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, whirlwind entered our lives quite by surprise, hence the name that is very apt under these circumstances. One day, quite by chance, we found a strange black and bay horse grazing in one of our meadows with our other horses quite happily, as if she'd always belonged there. Me and my mother stood there gobsmacked, our mouths hanging open in astonishment, our eyes wide with shock. Where in the world had this mysterious horse appeared from? She was fine, a resplendent horse, even more striking and alluring than the other horses in our field. They weren't adverse to her presence, but had welcomed her. We had no idea where she came from, but for us she was like a gift from heaven. From day one she had the most extraordinary temperament, unlike any other horse I've ever come across in my life. She was a remarkable horse. We would soon discover how special she really was. A mover and shaker among horses that could quite literally transform people's lives like magic, as whoever she touched was forever transmuted by her presence. She had a way of reassuring human beings, reaching out to them with a genuine love, as though she empathized with their plight. While she loved to gallop around the fields, much like the other horses, there was something that stood out about her, like a jewel in the crown, or like a bright rose among the thorns. "Where did she come from, Mum?" I'd asked. "Who would dump a quality American quarterback horse like this in our meadow? It seems nonsensical, ludicrous even, especially a horse like this that stands out in a crowd." "Well, my guess is the owner couldn't afford her upkeep, so she dumped the horse on us. Stranger things have happened, sweetheart. I'd say don't look a gift horse in the mouth under the circumstances. That would be a profound statement to make in her regard, for she is a fine horse indeed. But they could have sold her, couldn't they? Made some really good money out of her. She's worth a pretty penny, surely." "Maybe so, but maybe the owner thought the horse deserved a good quality life. Thought dropping her off with us would ensure she received the best care. We have a reputation here in Philly for giving our horses excellent lives. People aren't always motivated by money, sweetheart. Sometimes love, personal sacrifice comes into the equation, is so much more important to a person. Perhaps the owner put her heart above money. I take my hat off to her or to him for doing the right thing by putting the horse's quintessential needs above their own. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see she's one hell of a special horse. Mum, please can she be mine? I'll take such good care of her, I promise. I'll muck out her stables every day, exercise, feed her. I'll do everything it takes to make her feel loved." "You know what? That's a fabulous idea. Your two older sisters had their own horses when they were your age. You should certainly have your own. I was intending on giving you Ladybug, but now that Whirlwind has miraculously entered our lives and arrived on the scene, I don't see why she can't be yours. But I am relying on you to exercise her, muck out the stables, look after her. That way she'll know she's yours." "Oh, thank you, Mum," I said, covering her with hundreds of kisses all over the face. "This means the entire world to me. Did you hear that, Whirlwind?" I said, stroking my hands lovingly in her mane and plaiting it in between my fingers. "My mother says you're my horse. You're mine, Whirlwind." Whirlwind nuzzled me with her nostrils. The breath puffed out of her nose. She looked as if she understood every single word. Her ears were bent forwards, alert. She appeared seemingly engaged in our conversation, as her deep brown eyes darted from my mother then to me. watching our mannerisms curiously, reading our energy with an ardent efficiency, rubbing her dish-shaped head up and down against my arm affectionately. I think she understands what you're saying. She knows she's your horse. At that time when Whirlwind came into my life, I was about 18 years old, the last remaining daughter on my parents' farm. My other two sisters had long since left home. Both were practicing doctors, married with young children all of their own. Amanda was living in Scranton, and Bernice in Hazleton, but they would regularly come home to visit us, as we were a very close family. We would invariably get together on the weekends with their children and husbands to have spectacular barbecues on the patio, enjoying a cosy family rendezvous, extended lunches that meandered into the late evenings. Sometimes in the afternoons, me and my sisters would go horseback riding in the countryside together. Despite the age difference, I was very close to them, most especially my older sister Amanda, who always had my back and looked out for me. I was living on a spectacularly beautiful horseboarding farm in northeast Pennsylvania with both my parents, including areas like the Pocono Mountains, the Endless Mountains, along with the industrial cities of Scranton, Wilkes, Barre, Pittston, Hazleton, Nanticoke and Carbondale, in reasonably close proximity. My mother offered horse riding lessons on our farm, which obviously possessed riding arenas, horse barns, stalls, outbuildings, silvery ponds, and the list goes on. Ours was a typical asymmetrical double-storey American farmhouse with a front gable, central chimney, wraparound porch, overlooking exquisite views of endless undulating green turf, large clusters of red maples, flowering dogwoods, white ash and eastern white pine trees. It was not long after Whirlwind had graced our lives with her phenomenal, benevolent, calming presence that I soon began to realise what an exceptional, outstanding horse she really was, over and above what we had originally perceived. I've always known how remarkably special horses are, as I've grown around them all my life, and they really are incredible animals. Whirlwind had a huge affinity to human beings, especially humans that were ill or in need of encouragement. One day, one of my mother's more mature riding students, who was in her early 70s, began to dismount her horse Bright Eyes, when Whirlwind boldly came trotting over to her. She began nuzzling her left breast, looking at her with deep emotional eyes. It was like she was telling the student that something was seriously wrong with that breast. She seemed concerned, compassionate, empathetic. We all stared at Whirlwind agog, knowing that this horse was conveying something significant that needed her immediate attention. "Bloody hell," said Nicola. "Your horse keeps nuzzling my left breast. I better have it checked out with the doctor. She seems troubled about me." "Excellent idea, Nicola," piped my mother. "Horses are remarkably intuitive. It's not that she's smelling something weird on you. She's sensing a disfigurement in your energy field, or alignment if you like, warranting investigation. I do believe Whirlwind is trying to tell you something very significant." A week later, Nicola phoned us to tell us she had an aggressive form of breast cancer. Her doctor informed her that if she had not caught it in time, she could have been dead within a year. It was extraordinary. Whirlwind had saved her life. Then there was another lady, Caroline, who was in her early 30s, that was taking a riding lesson with my mother at the time. I was riding Whirlwind on that occasion, and had dismounted her. I was about to lead her away to the meadow to graze with the other horses, when Whirlwind promptly trotted over to Carol Ann and began to nuzzle her, looking at her through soulful eyes. It was clear she was offering her comfort of some kind, but why we could not imagine. It seemed that Carol Ann lapped up the kindness like a thirsty dog. "My goodness, your horse knows. How can she possibly know?" Carol Ann began to blubber, like a baby as the floodbanks of her eyes burst open, while tears cascaded down her face, leaving telltale white trails through her foundation, while Whirlwind stood there, offering her moral support with affectionate nuzzles. "What does Whirlwind know?" asked my mother. "My father passed away yesterday. I've barely been able to cope, and I'm falling apart at the seams. I'm so devastated, but this horse has sensed my pain. It's absolutely incredible." I soon began to notice in my own life how Whirlwind always perceptively, intuitively deduced when I was going through emotional trauma of some kind. much like when my boyfriend ended our relationship, proclaiming that he had fallen for someone else. It was a nagging, unpleasant recall for me that brings great discomfort, for nobody enjoys rifling through those kind of memories of being dumped. It's never a pretty picture, whatever way you look at it. "Sorry, Tessa," he had said to me. "There's no delicate way to say this to you, but I've met someone else. There's no point in pretending otherwise. You wouldn't want me to lie to you, would you?" "Actually, I think I would. Ouch, that really stings." "Don't be ridiculous, Tess. You know you appreciate the truth. You always have. You always will. You've always believed in being straight about things. Direct, honest. Not when it hits you in the face like a forklift truck, I don't. So who is she then, this girl, that you appear to have fallen for, that is clearly much better than I am?" I watched my boyfriend's face light up like a Christmas tree, as if thinking about this girl made him go weak at the knees. It made me shudder in disgust, seriously wanting to throw up. I felt nauseously sick. "I think you should go," I said, choking with tears that I tried desperately to suppress. "Now," I ordered. "But Tess, be reasonable. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. Go." My heart had broken into thousands of pieces. I was distraught, so distraught that for a while I never told anyone what had happened. I felt belittled, humiliated, fragile, vulnerable, ashamed even. I'm not actually sure why. Rejection is not a good feeling, any way you look at it. Like a roadside bandit, it stealthily sneaks upon you by surprise, catching you unaware and off your guard when you least expect it, demanding to seize your self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth from you, at gunpoint, like precious sparkling jewels that he wants to stash or squirrel away in his robber's bag that you can never have back again. Well, that's how it seemed for me. If my boyfriend thought I wasn't good enough, then maybe it was true, I thought. He had dropped me like a second-hand pair of sneakers he was no longer desirous to wear, had worn out, in favour for a bright new pair that on the surface appeared so much more beguiling. But I knew in my gut that before long he'd cast out this new girlfriend of his, almost as callously, cold-heartedly, and ruthlessly as he'd done me, when their relationship invariably lost its sparkle. The seemingly perfect package had worn away to reveal its hideous imperfections. When Whirlwind perceived my broken, fractured spirit, she was the one that comforted me in my distress. She trotted over to me, nuzzled me affectionately with her dish-shaped head, looking deep into my eyes with hers that were like deep pools of unconditional love. I felt as if she really got me. It was like she was saying, "You are good enough, Tess. You're too good for him." That was how successfully she lifted me out of my despondency, made me realise that yes, I was good enough. If my boyfriend could not see my value, it was his loss, my gain. It meant that I was too good for him, not the other way round. After my horse's encouragement, I gained a new lease of life, never once regretting or looking back on the old, but embracing the new with an eager zealousness and positive outlook. Soon word about Whirlwind's natural infinity with humans spread, and people were talking about my miracle horse. One day we received a phone call from an old lady who was in a dreadful state. "My husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer," she told us, sobbing on the phone. "He hasn't taken it well. It's like he's already died, given up. There's no fight left in him. He's emotionally declining. He refuses to eat. He really has withdrawn from life. His depression is quite considerable. I'm desperately concerned. I so want him to make the most of the time he has left, the time we have left together, that we can enjoy before he leaves this earth. I want it to mean something. But with him like this, in this grievous state of mind, how can we create any meaningful memories together?" "I'm very sorry to hear about that," said my mother. "Perhaps he needs to see a therapist." "That's what I was thinking," said the woman. "A very good therapist at that." "I'm sorry," said my mother, "but I board horses. I give riding lessons to pupils. I'm not in a professional capacity or position to help you. You need to phone up a hospice. I'm quite sure they'll put you in touch with the right people. They can really assist you. I'm sure they can. But you have the perfect therapist. How about that horse of yours? I've been hearing all about Whirlwind. Could she not help my husband? But how? Protested my mother. She's a horse, not a therapist. The woman was not taking no for an answer. She was quite insistent with my mother. Bring the horse to my neck of the woods. Lead her into my husband's bedroom. There's space in my home for a horse to walk through it. I'll pay all your transportation costs and your trouble. Very well, said my mother, if you really believe it'll help you. Oh, I do, said the woman. I really do. I was exceedingly excited taking Whirlwind to this woman's home to see the dying man. I was curious as to how she would react to him. Nothing was to prepare me for how poignant and magical this moment would be. Thank you so much for coming, said the woman, tears hanging like twinkling dewdrops on the edges of her dark eyelashes that thickly framed her eyelids, emphasizing her pretty brown eyes that held a glimmer of excitement in their depths. I could tell she firmly believed that Whirlwind was the quintessential catalyst to bring her husband out of his self-induced depression. My name is Alice Berger, she said, tossing her mane of bouncy brown curls to one side. Oh, she is a beauty, she said, looking at Whirlwind with such appreciation. What a magnificent horse! Whirlwind stood there so calm and relaxed, as if she knew exactly what she needed to do. I led her carefully into Alice Berger's house, swathed in her blue horse blanket. When we reached one of the closed doors, it was Whirlwind herself that initiated proceedings, by eagerly pushing the door open using her nuzzle. It was like she knew what needed to be done. She intended to do it. She sensed a dying man was in desperate need of comforting. She was eager to oblige, more than eager. She wanted to reach out to this hopeless man in a poignant way. The emaciated figure of a man lay on his bed, a picture of doom, hopelessness, despair, in his solitary confinement. He was swaddled in a cotton sheet that clung to his shape like cling film, emphasizing how wilted, frail, wasted his body had become. I could see the sharp shapes of his chest bones sticking through the skin like knotly, gnarled roots. He looked as fragile as a doll, his skin whiter than a sheet, mottled by liver spots. It clung to his skull tightly, like fine tissue paper. His sunken eyes were closed. His hollow cheeks left deep depressions on the side of his face. Whirlwind boldly trotted over to him. She stood so gracefully over the man's bed, her gentle nose sniffing the old man's face. The vibration of the horse's deep breaths, the ticklish hairs on his nose, most certainly aroused the man from his sleep. His eyes opened slowly like the blinds from a window. At first he seemed bewildered to have a horse in his bedroom. I mean, who wouldn't be? It would come as a surprise to anybody. Whirlwind nuzzled him kindly, surveying him through sympathetic dark brown eyes, as if empathizing with his pain, saying, I do understand your grief. The man's face changed as quickly as sunshine breaking through the overcast skies on a gloomy day. His bright brown eyes twinkled as he looked directly in the horse's eyes. The two of them had a magical, intimate moment together, so personal, private, exclusive, unique between the two of them, as though they were connecting on a deep soul level. The man smiled brightly. His hand reached up to stroke Whirlwind. The heaviness in the room was swallowed whole like a pill down the throat. Suddenly the room was bathed in a light ethereal energy. The man's bedroom was filled now with joyful laughter. What's her name? He asked me. Whirlwind, I said. Whirlwind. I like it, he said. What a lovely name. She's entered this room just like a whirlwind, positively lifting my spirits. It was true. Whirlwind changed the last few months of Neville Berger's life. He positively enjoyed the time he had left in the world with his wife Alice. It was thanks to Whirlwind's positive influences that had transformed his outlook over his progressive illness. Whirlwind came to visit him once a week. Neville began to have a much more sunny outlook. He began to eat again, treasuring every single moment he had left. The fear of dying that had hung over his life like a veil of dread dissipated like the vapour from a steaming iron. So he lived his life with a fervent reverence and thankful acclamation until he breathed his last, He died in peace, a very happy man. One day in the late summer of 2006, I was riding with Whirlwind on our land, as we have a sizable property. All of a sudden, Whirlwind began to smell something in the air that I could not perceive or discern myself personally. She looked disquieted. I'd seen that beleaguered look before. It was the sagacious, penetrating, erudite look that she had when she recognized the woman had breast cancer. I knew that Whirlwind had sensed something profound, ambiguous, significant, so I gave her my full attention. I knew when I needed to listen to my horse. I allowed her to lead the way. Something was seriously irking her. She was such an intuitive, sensitive horse. We trotted down the riding trail through the wood green that consisted of stunning red maple trees. Whirlwind stopped next to a very wide red maple tree, with an interesting curvaceous trunk scattered with pretty leaves. She began to whinny, move her front hoof backwards and forwards, as if pointing out something to me. Then she moved deliberately towards this massive, hairy form lying on the grass in a big lump. She began to nudge the bundle of hair with her dish-shaped head. At first this hairy form appeared to me like a big mass of bedraggled fur coats that someone had flung haphazardly in the field and were caked in dirt and muck, obviously requiring plenty of cleaning. Was something lying under that large fur coat, I wondered? A vagrant, perhaps? The fur began to move. A pair of startled, deep-set eyes in a cone-shaped head looked up at Whirlwind for a moment and then darted towards me. I was astonished. I was staring at a creature with a remarkably human face. The big mound of hair was attached to this thing. Whirlwind neighed, nuzzling the great big lump of grey hair, glancing at me as if to say, "Do something." What was this strange creature, I wondered, dismounting my horse and walking directly towards it and crouching over it. The creature's head looked up at me, dropping to one side, almost as if lifting up its head was an arduous ordeal. Its eyes rolled back in its sockets, exposing its whites. It was breathing rapidly, with difficulty, as if it was laborious. I touched the rank, smelly hair that clung to his body, as though saturated with perspiration. It felt unnaturally cold to the touch. It should have been warm, but it wasn't. The creature was clearly ill. Something was seriously wrong with it. I knew it was in trouble. I sensed it was dying. Me and Whirlwind rode back to the house, while I proceeded to phone my sister Amanda, who's a doctor. "Amanda," I piped, "it's Tess." "Oh, Tess, how lovely to hear from you. How are you? This is a lovely surprise." "Sis, I'm fine. I need your help urgently. If you don't get here at once, it's going to die." "It? What's it, sis? You do know I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not going to be good at treating a wild animal, Tess. Mum uses a great vet for the horses. Why don't you ask her for help?" "Sis, this is serious. The creature's big. It's covered in hair. It looks human. Well, it's got a human face and body shape, that is." "Oh my God! Are you being serious? Is this creature like a human but covered in hair? Is that what you're saying, sis?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. It's big, muscular, hairy, with a human face, overlong arms." "I think it's called a Sasquatch or Bigfoot, sis," she said. "Hang on, I'm coming now. We better keep this under wraps, Tess. No one can find out about this. This is very important. We have to be discreet. Understand? Don't even tell Mum and Dad. Promise me." "I promise," I said. "While you wait for me, I suggest you pitch up a tent in the woods. Put some bedding in there for the creature. I'll see you in a mo." When my sister arrived, she was with her husband Ned. They both eagerly followed me into the wood green, armed with medical supplies. I pointed to the hairy creature lying on the ground in a heap. "This is definitely a Sasquatch," she said excitedly. "I've read about these creatures before, but I never knew they were real. You're right. He's so very human." The creature groaned in agony, clutching his stomach in pain, looking at us through deep-set dark eyes that looked muddled and confused. He was too weak to lash out. It was clear he was disorientated, not comprehending what on earth was happening to him. He weighed an absolute ton, so we rolled him on a plastic ground sheet, dragging him into the tent, rolling him onto the bedding there. I had prepared piles and piles of duvet covers and blankets. I made it cosy for him, placing a bottle of water by his bed, along with a bowl of fruit and a bag of nuts, in case he became hungry. He sank into the warm, soft bedding with a grateful sigh. His body temperature was so low, I'm sure he was appreciative of the warmth. We covered him with a warm duvet. I poured some water down his throat. He drank it thirstily, as if he'd been too weak to drink for days. I could see his lips were cracking. They were terribly dry. It would be far too traumatizing for the creature to go indoors, unless we put him in an outside barn, my sister informed us. It's important for him to be close to nature. That's what he's comfortable with. The last thing we want to do is stress him out, as it could send him over the edge. Stress is a big deal for animals and humans. It's a huge killer. That's why when the cat gets the pigeon might just die from the shock, even if it's not injured. My sister began examining the creature. It's got a low body temperature. She pointed to a festering wound on its upper chest that I hadn't even noticed myself. Nasty, really nasty. It looks very infected. Poor thing. I need to clean it up and disinfect it. The creature needs immediate treatment. He has sepsis, blood poisoning, caused from the bacterial infection of the open wound. His body is beginning to shut down. If he doesn't receive intravenous fluids and antibiotics, he will surely die. Hopefully we can turn things around for him. He looks like he just might have a robust constitution. Before long, my sister was treating the creature with antibiotics and IV fluids that she had instinctively brought along for the creature. She informed me what needed to be done, showing me how to administer the medication and fluids over the next few days. I'm handing the reins over to you, Tess, relying on you. I know you're going to do a great job. You're very competent. We have to help this creature in secret. Otherwise it'll be a total nightmare for the poor little thing. Well, he's not very little, is he? But the last thing he needs is to be poked around, scrutinized by humans with their good intentions going awry. It'll only serve to stress out the poor thing. This Sasquatch needs his privacy and space like he has in nature, or he'll never make it, much like the pigeon with the cat. I want you to watch him, give him food when he's hungry and water. How long will he be like this, sis? I asked. I'm not sure. Some people with sepsis take weeks to recover, but I have a hunch this creature might heal a lot faster, maybe a few days or so, if we're lucky. You cannot be sure. Everybody's completely different. So he's not going to die, then? I don't think so, Tess, but you never know. You have to accept that we did the best we could for the poor thing. That's all we can do. Keep me posted. Let me know how he's doing. I looked after the creature tirelessly for 2 long days. I'd been giving him a jug to pee in so he didn't need to leave his bed. I indicated for him how to use it. He understood, and he did. I left him a bedpan which was never used. His eyes watched me curiously as I helped him drink water and fed him baby food with a spoon in his mouth, which he swallowed gratefully. He watched me with bright brown, interested eyes that would follow me wherever I moved around the tent, always curious, always interested. I enjoyed looking after him. On the 3rd day he had gone, abandoned the tent, pulled out his IV fluid drip. I was absolutely devastated. There was no sign of him anywhere. I phoned my sister in a dreadful panic, unable to control my tears. What's happened, Tess? He's gone. He's gone. Look, sis, we did our best to help the poor creature. I'm sad if he's dead. It's terribly, terribly sad. But just remember this, we did our best. We perhaps just arrived on the scene too late to be able to help him. These things happen. I don't mean he's dead, sis. He's gone. He's not in the tent anymore. He's vanished. Oh, well, there you go. He must have recovered, Tess. What on earth are you aggrieved about? You should be happy, proud of yourself. You did a fabulous job in taking care of him like a professional nurse. Without your intervention, he would surely have died. He would not have left the tent if he was unwell, I can assure you of that. This is very heartening news indeed. I thought he would heal fast. He has that kind of robust-looking body, the type that heals very efficiently on its own. But I wanted to see him. Why did he not wait for me to give him the all clear? Tess, he's a wild man. He's not going to behave like you or me. He would likely see the world differently to us, At least you know he's probably going to be absolutely fine. You should be proud of yourself. You attended to all his needs. Out of interest, are the fruit and nuts you left him still there? No, they're all gone. There you are. That's another good sign. If he took them with him, he intends to eat them. If you're about to die, Tess, you're not going to eat a single thing. Well, you're unlikely to. So my guess is he's fully recovered. Remember, in the beginning, he didn't even have an appetite. Weeks passed by, then months, with no sign of the Bigfoot that I'd looked after. I'm not going to kid. I was disappointed. I so wanted to see him. I regarded him like a friend, even though I'd only known him disorientated, groggy, terribly sick. When he began to get better, he was so sweet, the way he watched me with those curious eyes. I loved the way he ate the baby food. I could tell he was desperately shy, but he was also immensely grateful. I knew he knew without a shadow of a doubt that he had been delivered from the brink of death's door. It was in the early spring of 2007 that something quite extraordinary happened. The cold winter was behind us. I was so appreciating the shafts of sunlight that were swathing my body in such a pleasurable warmth. It was a perfectly magnificent day. My mother was in the training arena, instructing a young girl called Tori in riding lessons, while her devoted mother Maria watched the session from outside the ring, encouraging her daughter's every move. I waved to them cordially. "Hello, Tess," called Maria. "How's Whirlwind doing?" she called. "She's fine," I told her. It was so funny how people always asked after my horse before they ever inquired about me. I would sometimes be stopped in town by people I vaguely knew, asking about Whirlwind, as she had developed a devoted following of human fans. I was taking my horse to visit a hospice when the head nurse in charge of the facility was never around. She would have done her nut if she'd seen me bringing Whirlwind into the hospice, and certainly had my guts for garters. One of the doctors suggested that Whirlwind might be a great source of animal therapy for dying patients. She had been appalled. "Dr. Lewis," she had snapped, "what a ludicrous idea! Are you completely off your head? Barking mad? Bringing a horse into this facility? Are you mad? Can you imagine if it starts pooping all over the floor, leaving its droppings everywhere? It'll be desperately unhygienic. I pride myself in keeping this facility in impeccable condition. But it would be so good for the patient's morale, bring them a sense of joy." "Don't be ridiculous, Dr. Lewis. I've heard everything now. It's quite out of the question." Unbeknownst to her, when she was off duty, we would quickly whisk Whirlwind into the hospice to see the patients, and she certainly boosted their morale. It was such a beautiful spring day. I could feel joy in my heart as I was marvelling at the cloudless blue sky. Everything was bursting with the radiance of spring. The flowering dogwoods were blooming. The air was filled with joyful birdsong. All of a sudden Whirlwind smelt something, stood still in her tracks, as though she'd perceived something on the wind. All of a sudden, thundering through the brush towards us, was a Bigfoot I'd nursed to health. I was stunned. He looked absolutely magnificent. His formerly sickly hair seemed to sheen in the morning sun, as though shining from abundant good health. It was silky, smooth, almost as if it had been brushed. He stood up at about 8 foot tall, considerably bigger than I remembered him last. Maybe he had regained the weight he'd lost. His human face was easy to recognize. The creature glided towards Whirlwind. The critter nuzzled him affectionately. Then the Bigfoot looked directly into my eyes, and he said something into my mind. I promise you, as crazy as this sounds, I heard him say thank you. Thank you for saving my life. With that, he turned around, glided away. I was ecstatic. I had seen him again. He had acknowledged my help. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what a fabulous story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.